Tmac is back with you for episode number 5 of Unwritten Rules with Tmac. We have a Thursday night football game from this evening to recap, as well as a whole slate of NFL games this weekend that I'll give you my best against the spread picks for. I will update you all on the MLB playoff races, history for Shohei Ohtani tonight, and even we'll cover a little bit of the ongoing race for World First in World of Warcraft. So let's go ahead and get rolling. Thursday night football recap. We had the Jets against the Patriots. Jets win 24-3. Aaron Rodgers looked like vintage Aaron Rodgers tonight. 27 for 35, 281 yards, 2 touchdowns. Great performance. You saw him out of the pocket on the run, throwing balls down the field like he used to before he tore his Achilles with the Green Bay Packers. If you're a Jets fan, it's everything you wanted to see from Aaron Rodgers, and it's everything you wanted to see from the offensive side and the defensive side of the ball tonight. After week 1, the Jets defense looked a little suspect. It was against a 49ers team who probably has the best roster in the league, but you love to see the Jets defense only giving up 3 points. I think that's more along the lines of what people expected from the Jets this year on that side of the ball with the talent that they have. So, Jets fans probably excited after a game like tonight. Aaron Rodgers wasn't trying to get too excited. There was a little bit of a Twitter, I still call X Twitter, but on Twitter you could see a little interaction with this head coach, Robert Saleh, where, they high-fived each other and Saleh tried to give him a hug, and it looked like Rodgers mouthed something, not now, or it's too early to, basically celebrate. So, a little bit of a funny exchange, but at the end of the day, the Jets get their win. They're 2-1 to start the season. And if you're a Jets fan, you got to see everything you might have wanted to see tonight. For the New England Patriots, first 2 weeks, obviously week 1, you go and you beat a Bengals team who people expect to be making a deep playoff run. Not probably the game that you would have picked week 1 for an upset to happen, but it happened. Last week against the Seattle Seahawks, they play another really tough, close game, a game they probably should have won. They lose 23-20 against the Seattle Seahawks in week 2. 1-1 going into tonight. Tonight, they just got manhandled. The Jets had a great game plan, took everything away from them. Jacoby Brissett had no flow in the game. Ramondre Stevenson couldn't do anything. It looks like they loaded up on the defensive line and said, hey, Jacoby, go ahead and beat us with your weapons on the outside, and he was not able to do so. So, great game plan for the Jets against them. The game was out of hand, late in the game, 24-3, not much going on. So you got to see the the first round, third overall pick from the New England Patriots, Drake May, from this year. Obviously the backup quarterback in New England, getting a season to learn behind Jacoby Brissett, but he got to make his NFL debut in garbage time tonight. Can't really assess his performance or, take anything maybe away from it. He did get sacked once or twice, had a ball that was tipped and almost picked off. It was a ball that Michael Carter, the running back, probably should have caught for him. But, it probably was an exciting time for Drake May, making his first NFL debut outside of a preseason game. So you got to enjoy that. For the Jets running game, I think you saw a little bit of a tandem of running backs. I didn't personally think that. I have Breece Hall in one of my fantasy leagues, and he had a good game. He had a touchdown, 40 yards on 11 carries, 45 yards on 11 carries, 4 catches for about 30 yards. Nothing outrageous, but this Braylon Allen, it looks like a pretty solid stud running back, young guy, who can really help, Breece Hall, take the load off of him a little bit. So that might be a development for the New York Jets that will be a positive development. But 24-3 tonight, Jets manhandle the New England Patriots, and Jets are off and rolling. So we're going to go ahead and get into against the spread picks for this week. I'm going to give you 5, just like I did last week. If I did this podcast earlier, I would have given you the Jets -6. I actually was talking to a guy at work today when I walked in. He said, hey, what do you think, New England +6? I said, man, absolutely not. I said, it's a primetime game, Aaron Rodgers at home. I said a -6 spread for the Jets. They should easily cover that with the talented roster they have. So I would have given you that pick. I won't take credit for it now, obviously, because this is coming out after the fact. So I'm going to give you 5 different picks, and these are ones that I feel strongly about. I don't feel quite as good about all of these ones as I did maybe about last week's ones. So we'll go ahead and share the screen here, and we'll start with the first pick of the day, which I'm picking my Los Angeles Chargers against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I got the Chargers plus 1.5 against Pittsburgh this week. Tough battle on the road. It's a battle of defenses. Chargers second in the league, only allowing 227.5 yards per game. You have the Steelers fifth, allowing 260.5 yards per game. I think this game comes down to who has the better quarterback, who makes the bigger plays when the game matters the most. And I think you have Justin Herbert in that conversation with Justin Fields. And I think Justin Herbert takes that conversation every single day of the week. I have the Chargers plus 1.5. I predict them to win outright, start the season 3-0. We have the Texans. It's going to be the next pick. So we have Houston Texans going against the Minnesota Vikings. Houston's -2. I think this is the week you're going to see the luck and the early season magic of the Minnesota Vikings run out a little bit. The Houston Texans have studs everywhere on that team, whether it's on the offensive side of the ball with CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, to the defensive side of the ball, they have playmakers. Justin Jefferson not going to be 100% for the Minnesota Vikings. He has a quad injury. He did say he was 100% going to play this week, so you should expect to see him out there. But you have a guy like CJ Stroud who's completed 69% of his passes, nearly 500 yards and 3 touchdowns with no turnovers through 2 weeks. And you have his stud number one go-to wide receiver, Nico Collins. Last week, Nico Collins, 8 catches, 135 yards, and a touchdown. I expect that duo to link up a lot, and I expect the Texans to take this game handedly. Third one I'm going to go ahead and give you guys. I love the Arizona Cardinals again. This time, +3 at home. So they're underdogs at home facing the Detroit Lions. Last week, the Detroit Lions lost outright at home. Kyler Murray for the Arizona Cardinals, 73% completion percentage, 428 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions on the year, off to an unbelievable start. Found his new number one wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr. You saw them last week as Harrison Jr. had 4 catches, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. What a great game last week, and I expect the Cardinals to continue to build on that success here in week number 3. Jared Goff had a poor performance for the Lions with 2 picks last week, no touchdowns. He's going to go into a hostile environment, and I expect them to struggle again. Maybe they end up winning, but I expect the Cardinals to keep it very, very close. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Cardinals win outright. So we have the Cardinals +3 against the Detroit Lions here for week number 3. Fourth game I'll give you guys. We're going to scroll down just a little here. We got the Kansas City Chiefs and the Atlanta Falcons. Kansas City Chiefs have to get it on schedule here at some point. Mahomes, Kelsey, I feel like are going to get it rolling. They don't really have much choice to. They lost their number one running back with Isaiah Pacheco, broken fibula, out 6 to 8 weeks. Mahomes needs to protect the ball. He has thrown 3 interceptions already through the first 2 games of the season, and in order for him and Kelsey to get on track, he can't turn the ball over. Atlanta's defense is going to be tested. We know that this has been the weakness of their team. I mean, granted, last year their offense was a big weakness too with their quarterback and everything else. But Atlanta's defense has been in the gutter for probably the past 3 or 4 seasons. This is a big game. They're currently ranked 17th in the league through 2 games with 317.5 yards per game given up. Against a high-powered Chiefs offense, I expect the Chiefs to get it right. I expect the Chiefs to win this game on the road. -3.5 points, Chiefs. Fifth and final game I'm going to go give you guys here this week. We have the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Buffalo Bills. I have Buffalo Bills -5 versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars have been awful dating back to last year. They've lost 9 of their last 10 games. Trevor Lawrence has been mediocre at best. A lot of people were very, very high, including myself, on Trevor Lawrence last year. Took him as one of my fantasy quarterbacks starting, my number one quarterback, and it just didn't pan out. Through 2 games so far this year, he hasn't looked super great either. He has weapons with Christian Kirk. He has tight end and Evan Ingram. He needs to be able to figure it out and get the ball out. As far as the Buffalo Bills are concerned, huge turnaround from week 1. First half week 1 against the Cardinals looked pretty rough. Last week, a big win. This week, I expect another big win. Jacksonville, not a great team. The only difference that can possibly shake things up for Buffalo is going to be Josh Allen protecting the football. He's been pretty good at it so far this year. He has 1 fumble, 0 interceptions. He needs to continue to do that if he wants to win. 5th and final pick, Buffalo Bills -5 versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. So those are going to be my 5 against the spread picks this week. Last week we were 4-1. Hopefully we can do something similar to that. But as we know how betting and against the spreads go, anything can change any week. And I wouldn't be surprised to be 500 combined record for the season heading into next week, because that's just how things tend to work. So that's what you can expect here upcoming for Sunday NFL football. We obviously have a Monday night game to look forward to as well. Those are my 5 against the spread picks. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move right into MLB playoff race updates. So there's only 9 games left in the season for pretty much the majority of teams. So obviously things are getting tight. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys here the biggest race that's probably going in the wild card right now, which is going to be in the American League wild card. You can see where the Minnesota Twins are. I'll highlight it here for you. So Minnesota is now tied with the Detroit Tigers. So basically a month ago, and I'll show you a little graph here in a moment, about a month ago, the Detroit Tigers were 9.5 games behind the Minnesota Twins for that final wild card spot. In less than a month, the Tigers have made up the deficit and actually tied. That's a choke job by the Minnesota Twins, and that's an unbelievable winning streak, or multiple winning streaks, and just overall wins for the Detroit Tigers. Less than a month, you cover 9.5 games, and you give yourself a legitimate shot to be either the last wild card team in, or you might be the first team out. And that would be heartbreaking after making up such a huge deficit. So we're going to see what happens over the last 9 games. Right now, we have the Tigers who are tied, and there's currently only going to be games against Baltimore, and I forget what the other teams that they play are, but they have Baltimore Orioles, which is a very tough opponent. You have the Minnesota Twins going to be playing the Boston Red Sox, a little bit easier opponent, so it's going to be interesting to see. You do have the Seattle Mariners kind of sticking around a little bit, currently only 2 games back. Last night, you had Julio Rodriguez make an unbelievably terrible play, which I'm going to go ahead and show you guys here. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a background to this. So it's extra innings. You're down 2-1 against the New York Yankees. Runners are on first and third. There are 0 outs in this situation. So it's a little bit of an interesting play because, you know, I don't think you see things like this happen all the time, but I'll show you the clip and we will go ahead and look at it together. So watch this replay.
Wow, this is amazing right here. You watch this great.
Randy Arozarena throws his bat. Julio Rodriguez tries to dodge it. It looks like he forgets that the ball is still in play and that there was like a dead ball. Forgets to go back, and they end up just throwing him out at third base. Unbelievably terrible way for them to go out. And it's one of those things where that's a game that may make you miss the playoffs. All you had to do was get a runner on third home, and you would have been tied, possibly going to an 11th inning, or you continue to score and one more run, you're at home, you walk it off in the bottom of the 10th inning. Instead, 3 out, you got 2 outs there, next batter gets out, and you lose the ball game. So, terrible mishap, obviously, for Julio Rodriguez and the Seattle Mariners. So, we'll see what happens here starting tomorrow. You have the Tigers playing Baltimore. The Minnesota Twins are playing the Boston Red Sox. The Seattle Mariners are playing the Texas Rangers. So we'll see what happens there. We're going to move over to the National League wild card. The Padres currently have a 2-game lead over the Arizona Diamondbacks and now the New York Mets, as the New York Mets have gone and taken over the Atlanta Braves by a full 2 games. So you have the Padres starting a 3-game series tomorrow, Friday, against the White Sox. You got the Arizona Diamondbacks going against the Milwaukee Brewers. The New York Mets going against the Philadelphia Phillies. The Atlanta Braves are going to have to go on a tear here over the last 9 games of the season in order to get their way back into playoffs. They are only 2 games out, Arizona, New York could have a losing stretch here, 2-3 games in a row. If the Braves get hot during that stretch, as they do get to play the Miami Marlins, you could see the Atlanta Braves very easily get back up above either the Mets or the Diamondbacks. I think the Padres are pretty safe to be locked in at this point. Their magic number is currently 5. So that's a combination of either 5 wins for the Padres. It could be 3 wins and 2 losses for the Braves. Any combination of wins for the Padres and losses for the Braves that totals to 5. That's what the Padres need to guarantee themselves at least the very last wild card spot. They do still have a little shot for the division. I'll show you guys that here. The division tonight, the Dodgers ended up winning against the Miami Marlins pretty handedly. It was like 20-3 or something like that. Terrible. We wanted the Marlins to win. They are a terrible team, but they did win once already against the Dodgers. You were hoping as a Padres fan that they could win a second time. You got to watch Shohei Ohtani make history tonight. 50 homers, 50 stolen bases, and what a way to do it. I mean, what better fashion can you do it in other than going 6 for 6, 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, 2 stolen bases. He now has 51 home runs, 120 RBIs, a 1,005 OPS on the season. What a player. He's in both my fantasy baseball teams, in both my fantasy leagues. I'm currently in the championship in both, and when a batter gets you 55 points in one day, I mean, that's something that I don't know if I've ever seen. This might be the first time I've ever seen a batter get 50 or more points in a game in fantasy baseball. So, unbelievable performance from Shohei Ohtani, not just today, but this entire season. And we'll see what happens come playoffs if he can continue his dominant performances. They've been talking a little bit about possibly letting him pitch in the playoffs. Obviously, he just came off of Tommy John surgery. He's been rehabbing all year while still batting. I don't personally think that that's something that's going to happen. I think you float that idea out there to kind of get teams worried about, is he possibly going to go against us? But if I spent if I spent $700 million on a player for 10 years or $800 million, whatever he ended up getting, I'm pretty sure I'm preserving him and making sure that he gets the proper amount of recovery time before I throw him back out there on the mound. Because obviously at the end of the day, you have him for 9 more seasons and you want him to be the dual threat that you know he can be, where he's a top end pitcher when he's healthy. Obviously, as you can see, healthy or hurt elbow or anything else, he's one of the greatest hitters to ever play this game. So he's a Dodger. I hate it. The fact he got away with a gambling scandal at the beginning of the year, if you ask me and you ask a lot of other people, I'm sure they would tell you he's a Dodger. There's money involved. If it was anyone else, they would have been suspended. They would have had a much longer investigation before they were able to come back and play. At the end of the day, doesn't take away from his greatness and how unbelievable he is on the field. First 50-50 season in the history of Major League Baseball. The steals nowadays, maybe not as, flashy or not as, it's not as hard as it used to be. The rule changes over the last couple of years, bigger bags, pitchers can only throw over 2 times in at bat, so you're able to time it up easier. But at the end of the day, 50 bases is 50 bases. 50 homers is still damn hard to do. 50 home runs. So unbelievable season for Shohei Ohtani. We'll see what happens here shortly. And the Dodgers still actually have a little bit of a division race on their hands, so you want Ohtani to continue to do well. As a Padres fan like myself, you don't want him to do well. You need 4 games made up on the Dodgers in 9. Most likely not going to happen, although we do have 3 games coming up against the Dodgers in about a week. So maybe we can make a little bit of a run. It starts with sweeping the Chicago White Sox here this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's a team you have to sweep if you want a chance to win the division. I'll take that away. So those are the updates for Major League Baseball, National League, American League wildcard. There's not many division races left in the American League. You do have the Baltimore Orioles, who are 4 games behind the New York Yankees. It was 5 before tonight. The Yankees lost. The Baltimore Orioles won. Biggest news out of that is New York Yankees, Juan Soto did hurt his knee, going for what they say are precautionary x-rays. I mean, precautionary or not, you don't want to be going for x-rays right before the start of the playoffs. The Yankees did yesterday clinch a guaranteed playoff spot. That means that they're guaranteed at least a wild card. They haven't clinched the division quite yet. But big news, Juan Soto injured, knees hurt, got to get an x-ray. Wouldn't be surprised to see him miss a game or two before the playoffs here, as they do have a spot already locked in, but you definitely want to be playing for that top divisional spot. So the Yankees will be in a little bit of a bind there to figure out what the best way to handle Juan Soto is going to be. So we're going to go ahead and transition over to something that maybe a few of you will know about and a few of you may not, or the most of you probably won't know about. And that's just going to be covering a little bit of the race for World First. World of Warcraft started here on Tuesday. So what was that, 2 days ago? The new raid, Nerubar Palace, released. Liquid, Echo. Echo's a European guild. Liquid is an American guild. They basically are the two top that are going to be competing to kill the final boss out of, so there's 8 bosses in this raid. You want to be the first one to kill the very final boss. The first 4 bosses, pretty easy, right? At least for the caliber and quality of players that you have in these two guilds. You saw them run through first 4 within, 4 or 5 hours, which is very quick. You got to understand that these guys are playing for 16 hours a day currently. This is what they get paid to do, just like somebody gets paid to play baseball or any other sport. So they sit at their computer, they build up their character as much as they can to get the best gear before they go and take on the raid that gives you the best gear, right? You need to have gear that's almost good enough, or almost equivalent to the gear that you're trying to get. So you're doing a lot of different things like dungeons, what they call delves, which is basically like you can either do it with solo by yourself, you can do it with up to 5 players, but you're doing multiple types of content within the game to prepare yourself to be able to progress on this type of a raid. So right now you have Liquid, the American Guild, 5 out of 8 Mythic. So Mythic is the difficulty level. So it starts at Raid Finder is the lowest difficulty, which you can just find a group of random people that automatically joins you up together. You have the normal raid, which you do have to build your own raid group, but the difficulty is still pretty easy. You have a heroic raid where you start to see the difficulty ramp up a little bit. And then now you have the Mythic, which is top of the top. I mean, some of these bosses that you try to kill, you pull the boss and die, 100, 200, 300 times before you're successful in killing it. So these guys do it over a 2-week period, while most people that have a life and a job outside of playing video games that don't get paid, they take more like 3 or 4 months to do it, because you can't play for 16 hours a day for 2 weeks straight unless you get paid to do this sort of stuff. So right now, Liquid, 5 out of 8 Mythic. They killed Brood Twister. So Brood Twister, the boss is basically a little like a worm-looking thing that hatches eggs throughout the room. There's 3 quadrants in the room, and you need to break the eggs in each quadrant 3 or 4 eggs at a time. And it spawns additional ads on top of the boss that you need to obviously kill off. You need to interrupt, you need to stun. There's a lot of crowd control and things like that need to happen. There's a ton of damage going out on the raid of 20 people. So in a Mythic raid, 20 people is what the cap is, and that's how many you need to go in with. It's tuned around 20 people. And Brood Twister took them 100 pulls, right? This is only the 5th boss of the raid. They actually stealth nerfed this boss. I wouldn't say stealth. I mean, they obviously announced that they buffed the boss. In the middle of Liquid, the American Guild, polling this boss yesterday, they decided that they were going to increase the difficulty. They were probably making progress quicker than what the developers from Blizzard wanted them to. So they ended up increasing the difficulty. I'm not sure exactly what got changed in order to make it more difficult, but you could see the change right away. They were getting the pull below 50% yesterday. Next thing you know, they're wiping 70% nonstop all the time. So they had to relearn a few things in the fight in order to progress. Earlier this evening, about 4 or 5 hours ago, they did successfully knock the boss off. Brood Twister did go down, which was the world first for the 5th boss of the raid. They're the only guild in the world currently who has it killed. Right now, like I mentioned, they had 120 pulls to kill it. We have Echo, the European guild. They just woke up a little bit ago. They just started raiding. Yesterday, they attempted 53 pulls on the same Brood Twister boss. Their best pull was 40% and 53 pulls. So I think you'll see it killed, I won't say early in their day, but, probably before their lunch break, or maybe just a little after their lunch break, I would expect them to have a kill and be the second guild in the world to get 5 out of 8 mythic. Once you move on to the 6th boss, we've been watching Liquid do it. So Nexus Princess, that's going to be the 6th boss of the raid. And you can pick or choose. You can go to Brood Twister or Nexus Princess first. You could call either 5th or 6th boss of the raid. But I think they understand that Nexus Princess is going to be a more difficult challenge than Brood Twister, just because there's such a high DPS check. So damage per second, there's an enrage, basically. It's if you go through the phase 3 times, that's basically your enrage timer for this Nexus Princess boss. And even on heroic week 1, when I was doing it with friends and building our own group together, we had issues beating the DPS check on the heroic difficulty, and mythic is probably 10 times more difficult. But again, these are the best players in the world. This is what they do. They have spreadsheets, they do math equations, they know when to press certain buttons, what cooldowns and things to use at certain times. So they're much more prepared than, random 15 to 20 people going in there who don't know each other. These guys all play together every single day. So Nexus Princess, ton of damage on the raid, but also the DPS damage dealers, they need to be pumping out their damage in order to beat the enrage timer that happens. So we'll see what happens with that boss. We've only seen one guild, which is Liquid, pull that. They did pull it and got it to about 65, 67% tonight before they went off to bed. I don't think you're going to be seeing this raid fully cleared for probably 2 full weeks. If the 5th and the 6th boss are this difficult, the last 2 bosses of every raid, the 7th and 8th, or the 8th and 9th, depending on if they do 8 or 9 bosses in a raid, are always the most difficult bosses of the raid. The last 2 are always the premium, with obviously the last boss being even more substantially difficult. But if it's taking 120 pulls to kill the 5th and 6th boss, I wouldn't be surprised if it's taking them 250 to 300 kills for the 7th and 8th boss, if not even more. They did say that the last 4 bosses, that's Blizzard that I'm talking about, Blizzard has mentioned that the last 4 bosses are tuned around the race for world first. So if you're a normal person and you just come in and play the game, you have no shot of ever killing this. By the time you ever get to see any of this content, it will be nerfed, which is, made easier. Nerfed, that's what we call it in video game terms, is nerfed. You'll see it nerfed to the ground. I don't think that there's going to be any semblance of the same types of fights you're seeing for these last 4 bosses as what the majority of people are going to get to experience. There are a handful of other guilds who are 4 out of 8 mythic, because like I said, this is the first 4 bosses were not tuned around a race for world first. They wanted that to be not necessarily easy content, because I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy. I haven't killed it, and I don't plan on doing it most likely the whole time, because it is a major time commitment to do these things. You have to come together with 20 total people, and you got to be on a schedule. It's like, all right, every Tuesday, every Thursday, I'm going to play at this time with all 20 people, and we're going to do it for 3 or 4 hours at a time. I used to do that all the time. I used to play the game that way. I have children. I have a family now. It's much more difficult, and I just don't get the same enjoyment out of it. If I don't want to spend 3 or 4 months trying to kill one boss, especially when it's taking me 200 or 300 tries, you're relying on 19 other people around you to not make a mistake, as one person in the whole group can kill everybody, right? There are some bosses where if you don't do the right mechanic, the whole raid dies and you have to start all over again. So, you got to give a ton of credit, and you got to really love raiding if you want to do those things, because the time commitment is insane, especially for these race for world first guilds. Granted, they are being paid to play the game. How much they're being paid, I have no idea, but clearly it's enough for them to not work or take a lot of time off of work when new raids come out. You got to understand that new raids come out every 4 to 6 months. So this is something that happens 2 times a year. So, they can use their vacation if they do have actual jobs, but they are obviously being paid to play the game this many hours consecutively, day after day, until the final boss of the new raid is taken down. So that's kind of the update. The next closest guild is a guild called Instant Dollars. They are always up in the top 10 in the world as far as kills are concerned. They actually have a little bit better pull right now on Brood Twister over Echo. Echo, like I mentioned, 40% was their best pull yesterday. Instant Dollars, another American guild, 39.2% before they got off tonight. They aren't a guild that raids as many hours, as many days, so you'll see them start to drop down in the rankings a little bit just because they're not people that are being paid to play the game. They are obviously insanely very, very good players, but they don't have the same time investment as they all probably work normal jobs, and they're not being paid by a group or a company to, play World of Warcraft. So there are a few guilds that always make a nice run, and we'll see what happens here over the next week or two. But so far, interesting race. I definitely love a lot of the raid boss designs. A lot of fun in the raid. I've done 5 out of the 8 bosses on heroic in the raid so far myself. I've cleared 8 out of 8 bosses on the normal difficulty, which is the full raid. There are a lot of great mechanics, a lot of fun mechanics. I am somebody that tanks. So if, for people who don't know, a tank is basically the guy who eats the damage from the main guy, right? You're the main person that he's attacking. Physically, that is, there's a lot of spell casts and a lot of raid damage or AoE damage, area of effect damage that happens that is unavoidable based on abilities that the boss has. But the main physical abilities are getting directed towards myself, as I do play a demon hunter in game. It is going to be not maybe the most exciting tanking raid. And I think if you look at Echo's tank now, who's probably one of the top 2 or 3 tanks in the world, and if you were to ask me, I feel like he's the best tank in the world. But he even said something about it on Twitter and was like, this whole raid is just, okay, taunt, like basically you get a debuff on you from the boss. Like he adds a debuff that says, all right, you take 200% or 400% more damage from me now. And you have your second tank, so there's 2 tanks. He taunts it, so that way now he's taking the majority of the damage, and you're not taking damage while having a 300 or 400% increased damage buff on you. Pretty much every boss is like that. There's not much, I guess, variety for tanking, but overall, I think the designs of all the bosses is fun for everybody that's in the raid. So if you do play World of Warcraft, you've never played World of Warcraft, and you're interested in possibly trying it, I would highly recommend it. I've played it since I was in high school when I was 16. I'm 32, so 16 years ago is when I've started playing. And they still keep making new content, new expansions, and it's a game that me and my best friends still play to this day. We all started around the same time in high school, and we're obviously in our 30s now. It's still a game we play, and we follow the professional aspects of the game as well, which is why I like and enjoy talking about it, just like as I do with any sport, football, baseball, basketball, anything like that. This is a passion of mine as well. So if you're interested, highly recommend to check it out. If you already play World of Warcraft and you're looking for maybe a more competitive atmosphere, or you want to see what high-end content looks like, go to Twitch, look up Liquid, look up Echo. You'll see the streams. You can watch them pull the boss. You can see how many different things are going on. You're probably going to look at like, whoa, when, what, like what's all happening? And, there's a lot of, this is a very in-depth game. So if you're somebody who hasn't played and you have no idea about it, the first time you go on, you're like, dude, this is overwhelming. But there are easy ways to break it into pieces to make you understand it better. So highly recommend checking it out if it's something you might be interested in. And I'll keep you guys updated over the next 2 weeks as far as how the race is going. Outside of that, I don't have a ton else for you guys tonight. A couple things here. San Diego State men's basketball special reminder, October 1st. It will be coming out. We'll preview the season that's coming up. Today actually was announced, or I guess it's a little after midnight here, so yesterday now. Non-conference schedule, San Diego State men's basketball was announced. We have Gonzaga coming here to Viejas, San Diego State this year. We got to play Gonzaga last year in Gonzaga. I can't wait for the game. I'm a season ticket holder. It's probably going to be one of, if not the biggest game in our school's history as far as a home game is concerned, outside of obviously making a national championship. In season, might be the biggest opponent we've ever had come to VA. Can't wait. Obviously, San Diego State recently accepted their Pac-12 invite. They'll be transferring conferences in 2026. Gonzaga is a team that I think the Pac-12 is still looking at as far as possibly joining. That would make us a powerhouse conference. You have 2 top-tier schools, SDSU, San Diego State, and the Gonzaga Bulldogs in the same conference on the West Coast. I think the East Coast bias is going away if something like that happens. Gonzaga's always looked at highly, something that San Diego State maybe doesn't have yet. But I think over the last 2 years, I think the national media has really started to show us some love, really started to understand that the program that Brian Dutcher, our men's basketball head coach, has built here, obviously handed off to him by Steve Fisher. Unbelievable program. Top of the line, competes with the Gonzaga and all these blue blood schools every single year, like Duke, Kansas, and I think you're going to continue to see a huge improvement as far as our recruiting, the types of players we get now that we are going to be in an actual Power 5 conference versus just a mid-major conference. So go ahead and look out. October 1st, San Diego State men's basketball preview for the upcoming season. I'll go over their the non-conference schedule. I'll go over the in-conference schedule. I'll look ahead to the most important games, and we'll preview obviously some of the new coming players and obviously the players that we expect to have the biggest impact on the team this season. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. Can't wait to provide it for you guys. Hope you all enjoy your time today and this week. We'll talk to you guys soon. Have a good night.